Next, we're going to take a look at the new Timestretch and pitch shifting capabilities of Maschine. So just loaded up a drum pattern and a bass pattern here. I'm going to go over to group C. I'm going to load a vocal sample into this. So hit browse, sample, banks, we're going to go for loops. And this is just a sample that I've imported into Machine's library. So we're going for that first vocal sample there. Notice that you just need to be aware that if you want to scroll through the samples, you need to make sure that all these buttons aren't illuminated. So just turn them off. Otherwise, you'll just be affecting, for example, the volume of the Maschine project. So deactivate all those buttons and you can scroll through those samples. So I'm just going to click that in to load it. Remember, you can also just press the load button, button 8, as with previous versions. But I'm just going to press that rotary encoder in to load that sample. So I'm going to come out of browse. What we're going to do is time stretch this sample so it's in time with the other material that we've got in this project, and also pitch it so that it fits the key that we're working in as well. If you listen to it at the moment, it's a little bit slow and it's not in the right key. I'm going to select the sound slot, hit sampling, and press edit. Now, using buttons 5 and 7, I can scroll through the different actions that I can perform on that piece of audio. I'm going to select stretch and then press button 8, stretch settings. So you also get corresponding dialog box pop up on the software itself. So the top section, that's where you can affect the pitch shifting, and the bottom section, that's where we can do the time stretch. And all these controls are also accessible from these 8 rotaries as well. So let's take the time stretching first of all. You can see there's 2 different options. You've got beat mode, and you've got this thing called free mode, which we can adjust with rotary control number 4. So beat mode, and with auto detection on, you see where it says source BPM, it tells you the exact beats per minute of the original piece of audio. So 115 in brackets, and the number 2 preceding that tells you the number of bars that piece of audio was spanning. So 2 bars long, 115 beats per minute. And I know this is 115 beats per minute. I know that Maschine has got that spot on, because if you notice the actual name of the sample, it says 115 as in beats per minute. What we can then do is choose the new beats per minute for that sample to be stretched to. Now currently we're working at 121 BPM, so I can leave that new BPM as 121, and when I process that sample, that time stretch, it will then fit within the stretch length, which is 2 bars. That's the next little option down. So without changing any of the parameters, I'm just going to click the stretch button. Let me just undo that. You can hear before the stretch it's just lagging behind a little bit, and then after the stretch it's now perfectly in time with everything else that we've got going on. Let me just undo that again. I'm going to go settings. So I'm going to leave the source BPM as it is. The sample was 2 bars long and its original beats per minute is 115. I can leave the beats per minute or the new beats per minute rather, as 121. This time I can use the drop down menu to to select a different portion of musical time for this sample to fill. So for example, if I turn that down to 1 bar, that sample is going to play back in time with 121 beats per minute, but it's now only going to fill 1 bar rather than 2 bars. So if I stretch that now, you can hear the effect that that's having. Let me undo that. Settings. Again, I'm going to leave everything as it was, apart from the stretch length, which I'm now going to change to 4 bars. Press stretch. Now it's playing back at 121, but the sample is filling 4 bars. So that is where we've got auto detection on in beat mode. What we can do is change that to free, and then rather than working with clear defined divisions of a bar, we can simply use the new time here, rotary control number 7, to select a percentage. So if we want that to be twice as quick as it was, then we would set the stretch to 50%. If we want it to be twice as slow, then obviously we could set that to 200%. But more often than not, you're going to want your samples to fit in with the other material that you've got going on in your machine project. So I'd recommend leaving source time as beat mode. So I'm just going to stretch that. So we've got it playing in time with the drums and the bass. I'm going to click settings again. And this time we're going to work on a pitch shift so that the vocal is in key with the other material that we've got going on. To do this, what you need to do, if you don't want to affect the stretching as well, is under source time here, rotary 4, change that to free mode and just leave that as 100%. So that when we perform this stretch in inverted commas, if we leave this as 100%, the actual time stretch isn't going to be affected, it's just going to be the pitch. Now we can pitch this up or pitch it down in semitones, whilst keeping the length, the overall length of the sample the same. So if I process this stretch, I'm going to hit play. It's now in time and it's the correct pitch. Just going to undo that one more time. Press settings, button 8 one more time, because there's one really useful button called formant correction, which I'm going to now turn on when I perform that pitch shift of +3 semitones. I'm going to leave the formant correction on. So let's just hear how that affects the resulting audio. Now with the formant correction on, that sample still sounds natural. Without the formant correction, it sounds perhaps a little bit unnatural. So with the formant correction on, the effect is that it sounds like the same singer is just singing the note that is 3 semitones up, and it gives you a more natural sounding result. So it's just a case of experimenting with whether you want formant correction on or off. If you want a natural sounding result, put the formant correction on. So to get that sample playing along with the other material that we have, I'm just going to exit sampling mode. Select the first pattern, and I can very simply, I'm just going to use the mouse for this. Now obviously the pattern has to be 2 bars long. And because that sample is playing as a one-shot, we just program in even just a really short note right at the start of the bar, and it will play that sample through its entirety. Obviously then what we can do is go modules and change whether or not that's a one-shot or whether it's got some sort of envelope. We could do something like that and just play the very start of the sample. I'm just adjusting the envelope controls so that when that note is triggered, we can hear more or less of the sample. But if I leave that as a one shot, just delete the notes that are there, just doing it quickly, just using the mouse. Now that we've pitched the sample correctly and time stretched it, it's going to play in time with everything else. Now in previous versions of Maschine, you had the option to slice up the sample, and I'll show you why this new time stretch behaviour is really important when dealing with material like this. The slicing function is great for slicing up and speeding up or slowing down drum beats, drum loops to fit in with the tempo that you're working with, but it's maybe not so good for vocal material. So I'm going to go browse again, select the next sound slot along, hit browse, just load that sample a second time. Let's hit sampling. In fact, before I do that, I'm just going to go to modules, yeah. And I'm going to pitch it up initially by 3 semitones. So that it's in the right key first of all. Now obviously you don't have any sort of formant correction with this, so it's very much just a hard pitch shift rather than something that's maybe a bit more natural sounding. Now I'm going to go sampling. I'm going to pick the option to slice, button 3. And we can either slice in split mode or detect. I'm just going to leave it as slice mode. I'm just going to apply that. You can see we get a pattern of notes for that if I just hit restart. But you can hear the problem there, there's a gap in between each of those notes. So this is a real-time thing. What we could do, just hit restart. I can pitch that sampler back down by 3 semitones to the original pitch. And there won't be any gaps there now. However, obviously to have it in key, it needs to be pitched up by 3 semitones. And because each slice is being played that little bit quicker to accommodate that +3 semitone pitch shift, you can hear you getting a gap in between each of those individual slices, and that is accentuated the higher you pitch the sample. Obviously pitch it down. You won't have that problem because the samples will be overlapping. So that is why the time stretch is so important. It allows you to stretch out, lengthen the sample, and independently pitch it up or down as well, and you get a much more natural sounding result. Obviously, if you're going for that special stuttered type effect, then you might want to slice it up, but otherwise make use of the pitch shift and time stretch.